Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to go deeper into syntax, and in particular, the most important thing we're going to learn today is the notion of a syntactic rule. So syntax so far, recall that syntax is the study of the structure of sentences, how words combine together to form sentences in a language. A sentence is grammatical in a language if it follows the rules that you implicitly know as a speaker of that language. So if it sounds like something that someone might say, no matter how odd the circumstance, as long as it's something someone would say, it's grammatical in the language. Now, we've seen what phonological rules look like and what morphological rules and processes look like. Today we're going to be thinking about what syntactic rules look like. So the description of the syntax of a language is going to be a list of syntactic rules. We've seen already that words and sequences of words fall into what are called syntactic categories. So if two words or two sequences of words can be substituted for each other in all sentences, then they are in the same syntactic category. The definition of syntactic category is if you can substitute the words in all contexts, then they're in the same syntactic category. So I'm going to go through some examples of syntactic categories, and we're going to look at them in a slightly different way than we did last time. We're going to start thinking about the structure of rules as they combine together to form whole phrases and eventually whole sentences. So our example from last time was we ask, are cat and mouse, two words, are they in the same syntactic category? Remember the test for this. We have to find a grammatical sentence containing cat, like I saw the cat. And now we have to drop in mouse instead of cat, and we look at whether the sentence becomes ungrammatical when we do that. So I saw the cat is grammatical. We substitute mouse for cat, we get I saw the mouse. And if you do this for examples you can come up with that have the word cat in them, you'll find that you can always substitute in the word mouse and it's still grammatical. So cat and mouse are in the same grammatical category. So think for yourself, can you find any examples where this doesn't work? If there are no such examples, then cat and mouse are in the same syntactic category. So the words cat and mouse are indeed in the same syntactic category, and that category is noun, which we abbreviate with the letter N. We had another example here, the word the and the word blue. Are these in the same syntactic category in English? Well, let's do the test. We find a grammatical sentence that contains either the or blue. In this case, we'll start with the blanket is blue. Okay. See what happens when you substitute the for blue. The blanket is the. Is this grammatical? Is this grammatical English? The blanket is the, period? No, this is ungrammatical, so it gets the star. We conclude, therefore, that the word blue and the word the are in different syntactic categories. In fact, blue is what we call an adjective, and the is what we call a determiner. The category there is det for determiner. We also talked about some very interesting cases where we are looking at sequences of words, not just individual words. So the single word cat and the sequence of two words, the cat, are they in the same syntactic category? Well, we can do the test in the same way we did the test when it was just a single word. We first find a grammatical sentence that contains either cat or the cat. Like this, I like the cat. Now, I'm using this as an example for the single word cat. Okay? Now, we'll see what happens when we substitute the cat for cat in this sentence. We get, I like the cat. Okay, is this grammatical English? I like the cat? No, not grammatical, so it gets the star. So these are in different syntactic categories. In fact, cat is what we call a noun, and the cat is what we call a noun phrase, NP. Those are two different syntactic categories. So let's think now about that noun phrase, the cat. So we notice when we were doing the substitution, the noun phrase, the cat, contains inside of it the noun cat, right? So we can actually represent that structure in the following way. We know that the word the is a determiner, and we know that the word cat is a noun. Those two words together form the noun phrase. So what we have here is our first example of a syntactic tree, this little structure down here. What this says is that here we have a noun phrase which consists of a determiner followed by a noun. Now here's another example. Cat and furry cat. Are they in the same syntactic category? Well, let's do the test. We find a grammatical sentence containing cat or furry cat, like I like the furry cat. Okay, now we're going to drop in cat instead of furry cat. We get I like the cat. Still grammatical, right? And we can try doing it the other way. So we can start with I like the cat, and we can drop in furry cat, and we get I like the furry cat. We can start with I like the furry cat and use that as an example just for cat. And then we can substitute in furry cat, and what we get is I like the furry cat, still grammatical, right? So it turns out that cat and furry cat are substitutable in this way. So they're in the same grammatical category. In fact, you would draw the structure of it like this. We have furry and then cat. Well, furry is an adjective, and cat is a noun. And together, furry cat is in the same category as cat, so that would also be a noun. So what we have here is actually a noun which consists of an adjective followed by a noun. Really interesting, huh? So this is what we call a recursive rule. This is a noun which contains inside of it another noun. Furry cat is a noun, and inside of that is the noun cat. How about this? The furry cat and furry cat. Are they in the same grammatical category? Let's take a look. So first, we find a grammatical sentence containing the furry cat or containing furry cat. Like, I like the furry cat. We'll use that as our example for furry cat. And then we drop in the furry cat instead. We get I like the furry cat, ungrammatical, right? So they're in different categories. And in fact, the structure of the furry cat looks like this. We have cat, which is a noun. We have furry cat, which is also a noun. But the furry cat is a noun phrase. So we have furry cat forming a noun. Then we have the determiner combining with a noun to form a noun phrase. So as before, we see that we have a noun phrase consisting of a determiner followed by a noun. And in this case, that noun itself consists of an adjective followed by a noun. So we also talked about this notion last time of syntactic constraints. The goal of doing syntax, like as a linguist, when you're trying to figure out the syntax of a language, what you're trying to figure out is what are the rules that make some combinations of words grammatical and other combinations of words ungrammatical. And when you do that, you find there's two kinds of constraints. There's co-occurrence constraints. Co-occurrence constraints say that if you have one word somewhere in a sentence, that implies you must have some other word somewhere else in the sentence. And there's word order constraints. So word order constraints mean that words have to be in some particular order in order for the sentence to be grammatical. So to demonstrate these kinds of constraints to you, here's some examples. Co-occurrence constraints are exemplified by the following sentences. So we have a sentence like, Sally hasn't read the book, and that's grammatical. I think you can agree. How about Sally hasn't read the? Well, this is ungrammatical in English. How about Sally hasn't read this book? This is also ungrammatical in English. So what this shows us is a co-occurrence constraint. When you have a determiner like the, that implies there must be a noun, an N, like book. And also, there can only be one determiner that goes with a noun, or zero. So sometimes a word requires the presence of another word. So for example, when I said Sally hasn't read the book, is grammatical, but Sally hasn't read the is ungrammatical, that means that the presence of the determiner implies there must be a noun to go with it. A determiner requires a noun in English. It's not like that in every language, but English has a syntactic rule that says that a determiner requires a noun. Sometimes what happens is that a word rules out the presence of another word. So it's ungrammatical to say Sally hasn't read this book. That's because the presence of one determiner rules out the presence of another determiner. So that's another kind of co-occurrence constraint that we can see in English. The second kind of syntactic constraint is word order constraints. So we have a grammatical sentence like Sally hasn't read the book. But is the following grammatical? Sally hasn't read book the. This is ungrammatical. Doesn't work. How about this? Sally saw the book. That works. But saw Sally the book. This is not grammatical English. So notice that these examples satisfy co-occurrence constraints. So in Sally hasn't read book the determiner has a noun, but they're in the wrong order. So this violates a word order constraint of English. How about this? Sally the book saw. Again, that's ungrammatical. All the right words are there, but they're in the wrong order. So we see that certain words are sometimes required to go before certain other words. Like Sally read the book. Ungrammatical version would be Sally read book the. The determiner the has to go before the noun. So we can summarize that with the sequence of categories, det n. When we were looking at the larger sentence, we had Sally saw the book. That's grammatical, but saw Sally the book is not grammatical. This shows that the subject of a verb has to go before the verb in English. Similarly, sometimes words are required to go after the verb. So Sally saw the book is okay. Sally the book saw is ungrammatical in English. This shows that the object of the verb has to go after the verb in English. These are some of the word order constraints that are operative in the English language. Overall, we can say English has the word order subject, verb, object. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce the notion of syntactic rule. And syntactic rules are going to be ways of describing these co-occurrence and word order constraints as they exist in languages. So a syntactic rule, which is also called a phrase structure rule, states what order, it says what words can form a syntactic category and in what order. So remember we saw structures like this. This is a noun phrase which consists of a determiner the followed by a noun n. What this shows us is that a noun phrase in English can consist of a determiner followed by a noun. And so we state that using a syntactic rule that looks like this. This is a syntactic rule. And the way you read this is you say, the category noun phrase NP can consist of a determiner followed by a noun. So just as there is a special way to read phonological rules, there's a special way to read syntactic rules, and it's this. We say the category NP can consist of a det followed by an n. And now a syntactic rule that spells out the individual words in a category is a special kind of syntactic rule, which is called a lexical entry. So for example, how would you read this? How would you read this syntactic rule? This says the category n can consist of cat. So the category noun can consist of the word cat. This tells us that the word cat is a member of this particular syntactic category. We can also say the category n can consist of the word mouse. The category n can consist of the word dog, and so on. The category n for noun can consist of the word person. These are all what we call lexical entries for the category n. And usually when we write syntactic rules, we don't write them all one after the other like this for the lexical entries because it would get kind of tedious. We can write them in a sort of shorthand that looks like this. We say the category n can consist of the word cat, or the word mouse, or the word dog, or the word person, and so on. So these would be the lexical entries, not just for the category n, but also the category det for determiner, and adj for adjective. These lexical entries spell out the actual words that can realize a syntactic category. We've also seen examples of another special kind of rule called a recursive rule. So remember this example, furry cat. What we had here was a noun, which consists of an adjective and followed by another noun. So what this tells us is the category N can consist of an adj followed by an N. And that would be this syntactic rule. The category N can consist of adj followed by N. This is a recursive rule because we see that same category N on both the right-hand side of the rule and on the left-hand side of the rule. So the right-hand side means to the right of the arrow. The left-hand side means to the left of the arrow. The category noun can consist of an adjective followed by a noun, a recursive rule. So a syntactic rule can be recursive. That means that it has the same category or categories on the left-hand side and as it has on the right-hand side. This is here an example of a recursive rule. We'll see that there are other recursive rules in the English language. This allows us to build things like furry cat and also things like small furry cat. You can keep on adding adjectives to the noun in order to build a larger noun. So what we have here is a noun which consists of an adjective followed by a noun. First adjective is small. The second noun, recursively, consists of an adjective followed by a noun, where the first adjective is furry, and then the noun is cat. So this is a structure of a recursive noun. So we've developed, so far, this set of rules to describe the syntax of the English language. So far, we have figured out this much of the syntax of English using our syntactic category tests and so on. Now, we have something like the furry cat that consists of a determiner followed by an adjective followed by a noun. If we want to figure out the structure of this noun phrase, well, it would look like this. The adjective and the noun form a noun according to the second rule, and the determiner and the noun following it form a noun phrase according to the first rule in the list. So, what would be the syntactic rules that cover the rest of that sentence? Here's a sentence, Sally saw the cute cat. How would we cover the entire sentence in terms of its syntactic rules, not just the noun phrase part of it? Well, we notice that Sally saw the cute cat is grammatical. But when we say Sally saw a cute cat, that is not grammatical in English. So what this shows us is that the possible sentences here consist of Sally saw and then a noun phrase. Not a noun phrase. So any noun phrase can go into this slot here to form a grammatical sentence. Sally saw NP. Now, let's try to figure out the structure for the rest of the sentence. To do that, we're going to have to take on the verb. What is going on with the verb saw? What would be the syntactic rules which cover the verb saw? So we can say Sally saw the cute cat. That's grammatical. We can say Sally liked the cute cat. That's also grammatical, so that's showing us that there's a syntactic category here which includes both saw and liked. How about this? Sally slept the cute cat. Does this work? Does this make any sense? No, this is just ungrammatical, so it gets the star. How about this? Sally slept. That's okay. It's grammatical. So what we've seen here is that the verbs like saw and liked are actually in a different syntactic category from verbs like slept. So if we want to describe verbs, we're actually going to have to break up those verbs into different syntactic categories. In fact, we're going to call verbs like saw and liked transitive verbs, and the abbreviation for that is TV. That means they have to be followed by some object NP, some object noun phrase. And a verb like slept is what we call an intransitive verb, for which the abbreviation is V. That is a verb that cannot be followed by an object NP. Okay. So now let's write a rule that describes the fact that transitive verbs must be followed by an object NP. That's a co-occurrence constraint and a word order constraint. So we have that something must consist of a TV, transitive verb, followed by an NP. We're going to have to give a name to this syntactic category that consists of the TV followed by the NP. And we're going to call that a verb phrase, or VP. So we have that the category VP can consist of a TV followed by an NP. And we're going to have a rule for transitive verbs, intransitive verbs rather, as well. That would look like this. The category verb phrase, VP, can consist of V. So the verb phrase can consist of a transitive verb followed by an NP, or it can consist of an intransitive verb on its own. We're also going to need lexical entries for all the TVs, transitive verbs, and all the Vs, the intransitive verbs. So your intransitive verbs will be things like slept, ran, cried, jumped. These are verbs that don't take objects. And your TVs, transitive verbs, are going to be things like liked, saw, punched, kicked. These verbs that in fact do take objects. So now we can add in our verb phrase rules to our noun phrase rules, and we have a more complete set of rules describing the syntax of English. In fact, we can now conclude that all the sentences of this form are grammatical. So we have Sally and then any VP. Now what's a VP? Let's say a VP consists of a TV followed by an NP, and let's say the TV is liked, and let's say the NP is the cat. So then you would get Sally liked the cat. So anything in the syntactic category VP can go in this context to form a grammatical sentence in English. Now, if we want to expand this to also cover the word Sally, if we want to be able to generate this entire sentence using syntactic rules, then we're going to have to introduce a new syntactic category to cover the name Sally. To do that, I'm going to introduce this last rule on the list here, which says prop n, which stands for proper name. A prop n, let's say, can consist of any name, like Sally, Bob, Alice, whatever. And I've also added another rule in the noun column there. The second rule says a noun phrase can consist of a proper noun. So now with these rules, we can analyze the complete sentence. And we see that the rule that describes the complete sentence is the category S for sentence can consist of an NP followed by a VP. This is the rule that defines what a sentence is. A sentence consists of a noun phrase followed by a verb phrase. In this case, like for Sally saw the mouse, think about how this would break into parts according to our rules. So the mouse is a noun phrase. Saw the mouse is a verb phrase. Sally is a proper noun, which is a noun phrase. And the whole thing is a sentence, which consists of an NP followed by a VP. Now, there's another kind of verb, and then there's going to be yet another one that we have to talk about. So to demonstrate these ditransitive verbs, I'm going to give you some examples. We have a sentence like Sally liked Bob. That's grammatical, right? No problem. We have a sentence like Sally gave Bob the book. That's grammatical. No problem. But how about this? Sally gave Bob. Doesn't quite work, right? If someone says this, you're waiting to hear how they finish the sentence. It's not complete. It's not grammatical. So it gets the star. How about this? Sally liked Bob the book. That doesn't even make sense, right? That's ungrammatical. So what we see here is that the verb gave actually requires two objects, Bob and the book, whereas the verb liked only takes one object. It only takes the single object Bob, and it doesn't take a second object like the book. So we can describe a new rule for the verb phrase. We can say a verb phrase can consist of a ditransitive verb followed by two NPs. A ditransitive verb is a verb that has to take two objects. And those are going to be your verbs like gave and sent and handed and emailed. They're usually verbs that involve like transferring possession from one thing to another. Ditransitive verbs follow this rule. They have to be followed by two NPs. The last kind of verb I want to talk about is something called a sentential verb. Now, here's some examples. Sally thought Bob liked the cat. Grammatical or ungrammatical? It's grammatical. How about this? Sally thought Bob. Nope, doesn't make sense. How about this? Sally punched Bob. Well, that's violent and it's unfortunate. I hope they find better ways to deal with whatever they're working through, but it is grammatical. So how about this? Sally punched Bob liked the cat. Is that grammatical? No, that's not grammatical. So we see that the verb thought is in a different syntactic category than the verb punched. In fact, the verb thought is what we call a sentential verb, SV. A sentential verb is a verb which is followed not by an object NP, but rather by a sentence. So Bob liked the cat is a sentence, and that comes after a verb like thought. Your SVs, sentential verbs, are going to be things like thought, said, discovered, and so on. So, here are our syntactic rules for English so far. We have that a sentence can consist of a noun phrase followed by a verb phrase. A verb phrase can consist of an intransitive verb V, or a transitive verb followed by an NP, or a ditransitive verb followed by two NPs, or a sentential verb followed by an S. We have for noun phrases that a noun phrase can consist of a determiner followed by a noun. A noun phrase can consist of a proper name, and a noun can consist of an adjective followed by a noun. And then we have a whole bunch of lexical entries, which define the actual words that these things ground out as. So these rules so far describe a lot of the co-occurrence constraints and the word order constraints in the English language. And you can imagine doing something like using these rules to actually generate a random sentence. So here's how that might work. You start with the symbol S for sentence. You notice that can consist of a noun phrase followed by a verb phrase. So then you notice a noun phrase can consist of a proper name. A proper name can consist of a word like Sally. And then you notice a verb phrase can consist of a verb, an intransitive verb. An intransitive verb can consist of the word slept. And so now you've generated the sentence, Sally slept. This is like a machine that generates all of the grammatical sentences in English, or at least it should. We actually don't yet have enough rules to generate all the grammatical sentences in English. For example, we're going to need something like this. We need to account for adverbs. So we're going to need a rule, a recursive rule, that looks like this. A verb phrase can consist of a verb phrase followed by an adverb, where adverbs are things like well, furiously, calmly, quickly, badly. So that would let you generate sentences like Sally slept furiously, which is a bit implausible, but it's grammatical. Now, there's another kind of syntactic category in English that we're going to need to cover so that we can have a complete set of these rules. That is going to be a prepositional phrase, and a prepositional phrase is like the thing which is underlined in this example. The cat in the house chased the mouse. That's grammatical. And the rule that describes this kind of thing looks like this. It says the category prepositional phrase, PP, can consist of a preposition P followed by an NP, where prepositions are going to be these words like in, on, to, of, above, from, about, and so on. And we're also going to need a rule that looks like this. It says a noun can consist of a noun followed by a PP, a recursive rule that allows us to generate a noun which has a prepositional phrase modifying it. So we say that in that case, a PP is attaching to a noun. So that's what's going on here in the cat in the house. In that case, the PP is modifying the meaning of the noun that it attaches to. We can also have sentences like this. The cat slept in the house. It's grammatical. It's fine. What this shows is that a prepositional phrase PP can also attach to a verb. So the cat slept in the house. In this case, the phrase in the house is describing something about the sleeping. It's telling us where the sleeping is taking place. So to cover that, we're going to need a rule that looks like this. A verb phrase can consist of a verb phrase followed by a PP. So a PP can also attach to a verb phrase. So now we had this set of syntactic rules, and we're going to add the new ones we just came up with for prepositional phrases. So we have that a PP can consist of a P followed by an NP, and a noun can consist of a noun followed by a PP, and a VP can consist of a VP followed by a PP. So now we have a pretty good set of rules for describing the sentences in the English language. And when we come back next time, what we're going to talk about is how to apply these rules to generate sentences and to analyze sentences.